All right, so I'll kick off, Mark, because I'm a little bit unwell today. I might leave the introductions to you. I'll just say you're all the way from Austin, Texas to Australia
Great
and New
accent.
Zealand. Welcome. Thank you for giving up your time to chat with the COT TOT committee. We might have a few more just joining us, but yeah, looking forward to hearing from you today. You were one of the top when we put out to the members, who would you like to hear from? You know, it was overwhelming that what you had to say was really important to the group. So over to you.
Oh boy,
So you're
now I'm
really going to
scared.
have to show up, Mark.
No
I
pressure.
know. Oh geez. Yeah. Well, I guess good morning for all of you. It's the end of the workday for me, or fairly close. I actually have a client meeting in 52 minutes, so I definitely need to get off at the top of the hour. So I know that you had wanted me to talk about working processes and workflows and kind of how I do that in my business. And so I'll just, I don't know, do I have screen sharing? If you could allow some screen sharing, I'll share some screens. But before I do that, one of the things I'd always tried to follow some processes, but never really had like that standard operating procedure where everyone did stuff the same way. And I read this book called the Checklist Manifesto. It's written by a guy, Atul Gawande. And after reading that book, I became Mr. Workflow, Mr. Checklist. Everything has a workflow and a checklist. Like literally, if my assistant opens up the mail and there's a check from a client in there, he goes and he puts in the computer that we got a check, and it runs a whole workflow. And the workflow has him doing stuff and then sends it to me, and he brings me the check. Like it's step by step by step, all the way down to making sure that we've sent the receipt to the client for the check. And we have that for everything. So I read that book, and right after reading that book, we created this checklist that we use for financial planning. And my business is primarily fee-based financial planning and asset management. So I read the book. Really interesting book. I'm not going to give it all away. But it shows how checklists save lives in hospital, make buildings get built. It's amazing. But they tell you how to make a checklist. There's actually a checklist for how to make a checklist. And I started to use that. And the first checklist that we built, one of my business partners, Mike Ferrara, is a really good Excel guy, and I am awful. I am not Mr. Tech at all. I don't know how to make the formulas happen. Whenever there's anything that we have that's spreadsheet related, I'll say, hey, Mike, there's a problem on this column for this person, and you just need to fix it for me. And he fixes it, and he's like, it was really easy. You just had to do this and that and this. And I'm like, okay, now you're speaking another language. But he created this spreadsheet for us that we use. And I'll show you, this is how it started. And then I'll show you what it is now, because we've brought it into our CRM and created a workflow from it. But this is our original checklist that we put together, and it has formulas built in it. You'll see. So I'm giving a talk at TOT on the 26th. So I created one where I put in the day after was going to be the data gathering meeting for the plan. But you can see if I put in, well, let's put in today's date. It pre-fills. So we have our checklist with our timeline of dates. For this checklist, we sat down and looked and said, okay, what are all of the things we have to do when we're doing a financial plan? And we said, okay, the key day is when we start the plan. But prior to that, there's some things that we have to do, some regulatory stuff we need to do. We typically have had a previous meeting with them. That's happened before. So, but you can see we have every little thing that it would be. Analyze, build the plan, write the recommendations. Then, 15 days to then get it approved through the company, another 5 days, to deliver it, set that all up. And all the way through to reminders of all these different things that we need to do in the plan. And then Mike said, why don't we do a tab that's for the client that shows them the parts that involve them? And so that was the next thing. And then, so we have that. And then the third one is just a blank one where you'd handwrite in stuff, you'd print it out and handwrite. But this was kind of how our checklist and workflow processes started, was the plan, because there's so many steps to it, and it was easy to forget something. And then we would be further along in the financial plan process and not even know that we didn't have. So, in the United States, we have these 50 states, and the 50 states have different tax laws. So that's a fun thing. I don't know if you deal with that there, but if you live in Texas, your tax laws are completely different than if you live in Oklahoma, Louisiana, or New York. And so we have to have the state right. And so there's little pieces like that would get missed. And so we said, let's make the checklist so we don't miss the things that get missed. And there's so much regulation in the US, and I think you probably have a lot of regulation as well. A lot of our workflows, we put in the steps to keep us out of trouble with the regulators. As they create some new form we have to send out, which, like in this checklist, we would call that our ADVs and our privacy policy. And we had to send it through a specific software program, right? So all of the different little regulatory pieces, as they add those to the paperwork you have to do, it starts to get to be very easy to miss those things. And the other thing is, it's really hard to delegate if you don't have a good checklist, because the person you're delegating to needs to know what they're supposed to do. And so this was how our checklist and workflows started. And now we have them built out into workflows in our CRM. And so the CRM that we use is called WealthBox. I don't know if it's compliant in Australia or New Zealand, but it's WealthBox. It's definitely geared around the United States as far as what I've seen. But what we really liked about WealthBox was it made building workflows really, really easy to do and really easy to edit. Because if you're going to be working with these workflows and having other staff people work with the workflows, there's going to be things that you forget. There's going to be things that you mess up. There's going to be things that don't need to be in there. And having editing ability to fix the workflow, not just the template of the workflow, but the workflow you're working in at the time you're working in it, is really one of the things we liked most about this. So you can see I'm behind on this one. Final data entry I was supposed to do a couple weeks back, and I haven't. I really do think I actually did it. I just haven't checked it off, but I want to show you this workflow. And I don't know, this is probably too small for you to see, right? Is it all right, or is it too small?
Yeah, it looks good.
It's fine.
I'll just make it a little bigger. So as we check off each part in this workflow, it grays out and you can see who completed the task. So if I checked it off, even if it was someone else's task, let's say that that particular task is assigned to another member of the team. We do a lot of our business is shared business. So we'll have 2 advisors on a financial plan. So maybe it's the other advisor who is supposed to do it, but they're tied up with stuff and I just do it and check it off and it completes and goes to the next thing. It allows us to create multiple outcomes. So you could say everyone has signed the fee agreement, and if that's the case, then we need to save it in our filing software. And if it's not signed by everyone, then it says go back to the previous step and resend it out to whoever hasn't signed it, right? Because it's all DocuSign nowadays. And this is that same workflow as we looked at on the spreadsheet. And so you can see as we go along, there's myself and then like Matt Kennedy. He's going to take these pieces and then he sends them back to me for me to review. And then I send it to compliance for approval. And then my assistant puts it in the client's vault and puts it in our filing system and packages it up, you know, prints it out, puts it in a nice binder, all that stuff. And so everything that you saw in that other spreadsheet gets to be here. And then we're able to customize, which basically is editing on the fly in that one particular workflow that you're doing. So if I decided I'm not going to do it, right, that we don't need to enter whatever opportunities there are into the CRM, I could just delete this step. Or if I wanted to change who it's assigned to, I could do that. And then I just save the workflow and it makes the adjustment. And so we have a workflow like this for everything. That was a renewal financial plan. I'll show you our templates, and there's a lot of them. So we teach a retirement class, so we have a whole process for that with 34 steps in it. I was talking about the check came in. So
do you know the
check
little red devil in me, Mark, wants to actually not do one of those processes just to see how the system would work? I'll be, oh my goodness, that's so cool.
Yeah, so when you create it, right, so it's okay, check came in, so immediately it's always my assistant is the workflow starter, but then there's other advisors who have assistants as well. So instead of putting that, we just put workflow starter and then mobile deposit, because we can do that nowadays. Then we have this regulation called 3010, which basically we have to report to compliance that we got a check and what it was for. We have to report to compliance if we write an application and photocopy it and redact out stuff that they don't want to know. So all crazy stuff. But there's a whole process here. And then, and that's just for if a check comes in. Or if someone has an address change, we have a process. And then we've started to do it based on who the advisor is, just so it goes between that advisor and their assistant. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear the ones that are marked is me, but like NBTX is the other advisor that's in Texas. We have 2 advisors in New Jersey as well. So we have all of these different workflows that
May I
just,
ask a question, Mark?
yeah, absolutely.
So when you come up with a concept for it, you need a process, you need a process to be developed. Who's responsible? How do you make that happen? How do you put one together? That would be one question. And then the second one would be, how often do you review the processes? So is it something that you review as stuff happens and you realize actually this didn't kind of work because of this reason? Or is it done on a quarterly, monthly, annually, whatever basis it might be?
Yeah. So basically the way that we so I'll take the first question first. The way that we handle the setting up is, if it's something that we have to do, we want to have a workflow for it. And so if we want to do an address change, there's unfortunately multiple places we end up having to do the change.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this CRM to do workflows, but then the company I'm with, well, big insurance company, they have a CRM. And so some of the things we're having to do, we have to change it in our system, but then we need to go change it in the company system. And then if we're using a third-party insurance company, we might have to go tell them. And if we have a third-party mutual fund company, we might have to go tell them. So, so anything that we do, we create the process around. And typically we have the person that does most of the work on whatever that is, put it together and then review it.
Yeah.
And then changes happen along the way. So as we find that something doesn't work. So like one of the things we looked at a little bit ago was it had me restart a step. Well, sometimes when people are creating the workflows, they make a mistake and they have this restarting of a previous step over and over again, and you end up in this death loop. Like you never get out of it. No matter what you say, it goes back up and then back down and around and around and around. And so when we find, those are just outright mistakes.
Yeah.
But then we'll find, hey, so Checklist Manifesto, one of the rules in the checklist for making checklists is that if it's some little detail that gets missed from time to time, it definitely needs to be in the checklist. So like we have things in the workflow sometimes that are big things that never are forgotten to be done, right? You're doing a financial plan, you don't forget to collect your fee, or you don't forget to produce a plan. But the workflow, because it has built-in times, we have that timing built in. So like the spreadsheet had the financial plan with certain number of days between each thing. This does as well. You can see 1 day after, 1 day, 2 weeks after, 28 days, 33 days. This is all set up so that 90 days later, the delivery of the plan is happening. So if we were to add up the different days and stuff, we'd see this is 90 days. So the workflow helps keep us on track. The biggest challenge that I have with it is that we get behind on a workflow. And so the more hands that are in the particular pot, the more times we end up slowing it down. So if it's a financial plan and I'm the only advisor on it, it is very rare that it even takes me the full 90 days to finish the plan. If it's 2 advisors on it, it's very rare that the plan gets done in 90 days because the workflow, if it's just me, is only between myself and my assistant who sits 20 feet away. But if it's with other advisors, they're in another city or in another time zone even. And so we see that things kind of get held up. So it's supposed to keep us on track to get done quicker. It has helped us. We are more efficient than we were with the spreadsheet version, because the spreadsheet version was basically in Dropbox for each person. And then, we would have to email each other and say, hey, I finished this. Now you need to do that. Well, now we don't need to do that. When one finishes, it shows up in the workflow for the person. And every day I get an email that shows what my items for that day are. So that's kind of how we use that, and what, and how we make our changes along the way.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, Mark. Just using the change of address as an example.
Right.
Let's call it, the same issues exist here, right? Your CRM, someone else's CRM, an investment
Right.
company, insurance company. In terms of how you guys have structured your workflow, do you have it in there to say to get that person of how many is there, or does it ask the question, or is it, I'll call it company hygiene for the administrator to go, right, I've got to do an insurance policy, a pension, a bond, and a CRM?
So, well, here, let's look at it. So, yeah, we
Don't ask
have...
Mark, because he doesn't do that part.
Well, that's the same problem in
I
my
don't,
business,
you'll see
right?
it, yeah. So, but that's a great point, and it's probably something that we need to add in here is verify how many places we need to make that change, because we don't have that in here, right? So we say change it here. Then next thing is to verify. So here's the other thing, licensing. We have to be licensed in every state where a client goes. So if my client moves to California, which is a state I'm not licensed in, and I do have a client that's going to move there and she's a good one, so I'm going to have to get licensed there. That is like a huge deal. So knowing that all advisors are registered and licensed in the new state, that's a big deal. So we change it here first. Then we check, are all the agents licensed there? Because once we change it with the company takes any advisors that aren't licensed in that state off the business. And now we have to get licensed. It takes it a little bit. So then we might say, hey, let's wait a little bit. So those two pieces, those came in because we had a client move to North Carolina and Mike wasn't licensed in North Carolina, but Irene and I were. And so all of a sudden Mike was kicked off the case and had to get licensed, and it wasn't like an overnight process. And so that held up some stuff. Then we change it in our financial planning software, and in our newsletter mailer, which now we don't actually do those. They're all electronic, so we should remove that step. So, and then confirm that all the licenses are in place, then change it wherever. But this is where I think we would want to put a step of making sure that we look at how many places do we need to change it, because that could be multiple places, and then have that be a check, and then verify that the changes actually all happened. Because like if we change it at New York Life, we change it in their CRM, and then it takes time to filter through to the annuity division, the life division, the variable annuity division, the mutual fund. Like it's, who knows how long it actually takes for all the places to get it. But yeah, that's a great point, Paul. So what other questions do you all have on workflows and processes that we're doing?
Just going back one step to Katrina's comment, because I suspect, that we're kindred spirits in terms of a lack of desire or ability to build workflows.
I'm so there with you.
So in terms of your business, how did you guys sort of sit there, one as the leaders, and know that you have to be across it, so to speak, or to work to your cadence, but then two, did you empower someone internally to do this, or someone knew how to build it, or you got a consultant in to manage it for you and step it out?
Yeah, so my assistant basically built out the workflows. And
is that because they are super experienced, so that was easy?
Their experience, that's what they love doing, Paul. You and I hate it. So does Mark.
Yeah, it was she was, so my assistant at the time that we got this this tool, she went on and did all the training with them for how to do it. And then she would build them out and then print it out. And then I would review it all and say, oh, I don't think we need this, or this should have instead of just going to the next step, this should have multiple potential outcomes. And what happens if this doesn't? Like, we need it to create a reminder back to us. So that's that restart the step. So we have it where it does that. So because each time it restarts the step, it then puts it back up into the top of your workflow, and then you see it again, versus trying to remember it. So yeah, I empowered my assistant to do the workflows. And basically I said, everything that we need to do in the course of, outside of answering the phone, and transferring a call, I don't think we need a workflow for that. But other than that, we want a workflow. So, and so she would build it out, and then she's been gone now for 2.5 years. And my new assistant, he became kind of the workflow person, and he actually learned he did some training with them on them and learned how to create some things they call milestones into it, where it's like a set date. So if you go in and you put in the milestone of, for instance, our class, the first class is I'm doing one starts January 30th. If you put in January 30th, it backfills all of the things you need to do to be prepared to give that seminar, from the getting it approved through legal and getting the mailers and getting the mailing list and, paying the place that you're giving it, and all those things and it puts them all in, it backfills them, and then it also front fills all the follow-up afterwards. So he learned how to do that. So yeah, none of us advisors really build any of them. And then once you have one, let's say it's the financial planning one, if another advisor says, hey, I want to do mine a little different when I'm doing a plan alone, they just duplicate one of the others and then go in and just change who are the players in this. And if it's a plan alone, you don't have a part of have the other advisor review your recommendations to make sure that your sentences are correct, and all the things that happen when you try to proofread for yourself. You'll have a double word, and in your mind you don't see it as a double word, but someone else would. So that type of stuff, is part of what we do with them. But yeah, it's not the advisor creating them. We tend to just more critique them. And on our team calls every other Friday, I'm on the other advisors. I'm pulling up their workflows and say, how is it that there's a workflow item from May? It's September. And this particular item is new business for us. Why are you not going after this? And so,
So it certainly
least
allows for
now-
what you're saying is it certainly allows for transparency. Everyone
yes,
can see what everyone's responsible for, and it's been owned by that person. And if they're not following through, you can certainly see it from a workflow point of view. How do you
yes.
design your workflows to be client centric? So what I mean by that is that when we develop ours, I always put the client at the forefront. How does this experience feel to the client? Is the client getting what they need out of this experience? And then build it from there. And then obviously any problems that come out, we fix it, evolve it, it gets better, and everyone sings from the same song sheet. So how do you guys look at how the client's experiencing through all your workflows? Is there a way for you to sort of see that?
Wow, that's a great question.
Not trying to trip you up on that one, Mark, I promise. It's a
So,
really interesting one. We can become so process driven, and having
Right.
just had a monitoring visit from our regulator recently, and the only thing they could pick us up on, bless their little cotton socks, loved them to death, and could have actually given birth to every single one of them. They were that young. But, the only thing they could pick us up on was two processes that we just hadn't put a process document in play, which is great because now we've
Okay.
done it and it's all sorted. But so you need them, you know why you
Right.
need them, but how do we make sure that they're client centric and that the client feels part of that process?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is the stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
On them, right? So, the address change, right? I guess I really should edit the address change one, because that would be one where you would say, hey, client, your address has been changed at all of these places.
Yeah.
We did it. We verified it. It shows as changed. You should get some confirmations. That should be part of the process.
Yeah.
I'll show you the one. So the plan process has lots of client touch points and meetings. But one where we didn't have something, and I said, we really need to have this. We really need to have a setup. Let me find where it is. There we go. So this is opening a new investment account. So there's some stuff like, well, this is a regulatory thing. We have to send an email that says why what we recommended is in their best interest. And so our company has this standard one that's actually in the application paperwork. And it will list every product and say, if you got this, it was because of this. And if you got that, it was because of this. I'm like, the client doesn't know the difference of this name of one annuity versus that name of another annuity from the same carrier, right? So I said, well, that might meet the regulator, but I want my client to actually understand. So I actually put together templates that we use to email that letter out. But one of the things that we did was, where it's client-centric, we add them to a certain list that I have in Outlook, because I send a weekly email to people that have the fee-based investment accounts. And then we set up access to a couple different places where they can view their account. And then we do a meeting with them to take them through that here at the end. So one of the big things that I found is the type of statement that a client is going to get may be different than what they're used to from where their money came, right? So if their money came from an employer retirement plan and we now have moved it into an account with us where it's investing in, ETFs and mutual funds, the statement is a brokerage statement is going to be much, much different than a 401k plan statement, or whatever your retirement plans are called there, right? And so I said, we need to have in a process where it says we're going to review that initial statement. So when we get out, I add a month to give a full month to happen so that they get a statement. And then we do a call where I review the statement with them on the screen. I set up their access to the performance website and show them that. So that's where we can get that to be more client-centric in that particular scenario. And we update the product in every different place where we might have it as well. So depending on the type of account and everything.
Mark, when you implemented all these workflows, what was the tone of the sort of staff in the business? Was it seen as additional work, or were they going, this is great, it's going to make everything clear? And then how's it seen sort of 2 years down the track? Because it sounds like it's been in place for some time.
Yeah, so it was, so the admin staff, for one thing, like my assistant putting it all together, she had a lot of fun doing it. Like it was definitely, I definitely had the right person.
We definitely have different opinions on fun, don't we? Honestly,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yeah.
your nightmare.
Yeah. So, so she really had a good time putting them together. And I think the admin staff likes it mainly because it allows them to hold us advisors accountable. Whenever stuff's held up, it's always us. It's never the admin staff, right? You give them something and, you give them 2 days to do it and they did it in 10 minutes from when you gave it to them and it's done. You give us something and we're like, oh boy, when am I going to fit that in? And then maybe it gets done, maybe it doesn't. With this, they're able to look in and say, hey, did this happen? Did that happen? My weekly meeting with my admin, he's always coming back and saying, hey, there was this and so has it in their workflow. You might want to follow up on that. And so then I shoot Mike or Irene or Matt an email and say, hey, this is holding this up and we really need to get this done. And so I think that it was well received. I don't get, I'll say, pushback from the other advisors. What I get is that they don't all really do it and look at it and see, where am I on, as far as being on task, right? So like, it's rare I'm behind on any, and to be behind on this many, like 9 is a lot for me. Now, I cut myself a break. I was gone for 8 days and I've been back for 2, and then I'm going to Hawaii and I have a crazy week this week. So, just going to be a little behind until I get caught up. But I'm almost always caught up on here. I can go and like May, like this was follow up. This is business. So, there's a lot there's a lot back there. So
I love
there
that
is that-
clarity. I love that transparency. It's fantastic.
yeah, and we all can see, like, any of them can pull any person's, right? And so
Should we pull Irene's up?
sure.
Irene's
'cause
been
you
in the
know
committee
her.
with me this last year. She's an absolute honey.
Yep. So yeah, here we'll throw Irene under the bus. Watch, hers will have none. See, she's got some overdue, even back to June. But
That's interesting.
yeah, so but she has a lot more. So a lot of these are tasks, not just workflows. If I just looked at workflows only, it'd be different, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. Her assistant, so she and her assistant really make use of this. So her assistant's putting tasks in all the time for herself, for Irene. And so it just, it creates all these tasks, but they never get missed, right? Because it's easy to forget things or miss things. There's so much going on all the time. This, this just really helps. And I know there's other, this one happens to be a CRM program, but there are plenty of other programs that are around workflows. And so, and I certainly don't know what they are or how they work, but I think the more we can automate the workflows to pass tasks between people when you have multiple people handling things is really a key thing to keep business going and to keep clients happy and regulators happy too, right? So because the worst thing is when regulators get involved because clients are unhappy. So what other questions do you all have?
I think that's brilliant, Mark. And I love, the whole, if it isn't in a task, it doesn't exist kind of scenario works for me.
Yeah, I mean, I still have notes and things around, but they're not to the degree that I used to. And it's just, I take some notes. But if it's something that definitely needs to get done, I don't leave it to a note on my desk. It's getting put in as a task, and maybe I put it out into the future. So because I know I can't get to it right away. But yeah, being able to have a program that's just going to kind of keep that stuff up and keep it in front.
And Mark, oh, sorry.
Yeah. And then just trying to be diligent with it, that's the hardest part, right? So we're not going to be perfect. It's all about making progress. And so we don't have this perfect. We never will have it perfect. Just from today now, I have a couple of things I know I need to improve right in here, just based on questions, right? So, but it's way better than it was before. And it just continues to improve. And that's really all that we can ask, as you're trying to go about your life.
I think when you're definitely working from multiple offices as well, and now this work from home scenario, or in some of you guys' cases, it might be having staff up in the Philippines or wherever it might be, virtuals and stuff. It's all singing from the same song sheet. It's having the same experience for that client each and everywhere on how you do things. And I think that's where you can get your good processes, your good workflows in place, always keeping it client centric. And putting value on the things that you should be doing and the value of things that others should be doing. That's where a good
Yeah.
process and workflow works. You know, I get the greatest pleasure of seeing Mark flit around the countryside on Facebook and all his beautiful holidays, spending his gorgeous time with his family and his wife and all the rest of it. And it, you know, he's able to do that, but still be an extremely talented man in business because he's got all these things that tell him what he should be doing on each given day. So I think that's awesome. I appreciate your
Yeah,
time,
probably
Mark.
the biggest thing is I don't delegate enough of the things in the workflow. There's probably all sorts of parts of the workflow that should be delegated, or I shouldn't try to pull those things back. You know, it's something that's delegated, but it's not being done fast enough. So then I just go do it anyway. I think that was part of in the book Shine, he talked about that. So yeah, and so you would have seen all the posts with my wife and I with Irene and her husband then all last week in California. So
You look like you were having a wonderful time. Felt very jealous
oh
as I
yeah,
sit here
yeah,
in New Zealand and it's
we
cold.
got to have a nice encounter with a rattlesnake. You know, those are always nice.
You're talking to Australians here.
I know,
They have
right?
every
That's
deadly
nothing.
thing in the world, and us
I
Kiwis don't
know.
have any.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that you guys eat rattlesnakes for breakfast, right?
Make a good pair of boots. Thank you so much for sharing, Mark. We use Teams for our workflows, and the girls in the Philippines that I have run them, we've found them to just, you know, you don't miss things then, or if you do, you go back and check the workflow. Did someone tick something off that, you know, hadn't been done, or that sort of thing? So yeah, they do make life so much easier. I know you have to run off to an appointment. Mark, is there a final question for Mark, or all good?
Just an appreciation of your time, Mark. You're wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
I'll see you in a
Thank you.
couple of
Happy to be
days.
here.
Thank you. That was
All
brilliant.
right, y'all have a great day. And if you have any other questions, you know, Amanda and Kat know how to get in touch with me.
I
and
did
Johnny.
put the link to the book in the chat if anyone wants to just jump on that and have a quick sticky at the Checklist Manifesto. But
Downloaded it for the flight there, Mark. I'll be all organised by the time I get to Hawaii.
All right, so in Hawaii, you'll tell me how much you like the book.
I will
Perfect.
try to tell you what I think of page 2.
Okay.
all righty, guys, have a good one.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care.
All right.
Cool.
Bye,
Ta-da.
See
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.